Buenas noches a todos. This is Abelardo de la Peña Jr., Director of Marketing and Communications at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, welcoming you to tonight's edition of En Casa con La Plaza. It's our virtual programming, which includes presentations, conversations, demonstrations, and performances at least 3 times per week. Our way of fulfilling our mission of honoring the past, inspiring the future, and recognizing the enduring cultural influences of Mexicans, Mexican Americans, and all Latinas and Latinos in LA through our exhibitions, our programming, and educational experiences. And this is going to be an educational and very entertaining experience for all of you viewing at home. If you're on Zoom, welcome. Please use the comment section to let us know where you're viewing from. Use the Q&A feature to ask questions. We may answer them during the program, perhaps after the program's over or towards the end. If you're on Facebook also, please make comments, ask questions. You can start a watch party, share with your friends. This is going to be great. Everybody, let us know where you're viewing from. We appreciate knowing where our viewers are coming in from. Tonight, a very special program. We're talking about next year. Of course, we've all been going through our changes through this pandemic, but we're hoping for a brighter future. And we're looking towards 2021, which hopefully will be a time to visit friends, families throughout, but also to visit and go and travel to, in this case, Cuba. We'll be talking about that, but let me introduce to you, please, our MC for the night, our host, John Echeveste, the CEO of La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, who himself has been to Cuba at least a couple times and will surely share his experience as well as introducing our special guest. So please, John, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Abelardo, and good evening, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. I'm coming to you live from La Plaza Vieja in Havana, Cuba. I wish, not exactly, but this is one of the images that we captured last year when we took a tour group down to Havana. I think that was in April or so, right, guys? Abelardo was on that trip, along as Kim Chavez from our staff, and another 18 to 20 people. And we had a terrific time there on the island. Just saw everything and experienced all that the Cuban culture has to offer. We really enjoyed it. It was my second time there. And, you know, one of the things that La Plaza has been doing over the last couple of years is creating these cultural travel experiences. So last year, we took the group to Cuba. We also took another group to the Yucatan area of Mexico, and they had a great time there in Cuba. And then we did a weekend trip to, of course, to Valle de Guadalupe in Baja, California. And we experienced all the wineries there in the Baja region. All of those, of course, got canceled this year for obvious reasons. But we are making plans for a triumphant return to Havana in November of 2021. Things look good, and we feel pretty confident that that can happen. So we want to tell you what it's like to travel to Cuba, what's going on in the country right now, what the current conditions are. And to do that, we have 3 special guests with Project Con Amor, who we work with in conducting our trips to Cuba. And I don't think anybody here in LA knows Cuba better than these people. So let me introduce them to you. My longtime friend, Adolfo Nodal, is here. And Al, some of you may know, served as the Director of Cultural Affairs in the Mayor Tom Bradley administration at City Hall, where we first worked together way back, Al, in 1990, when we produced the first Fiesta Broadway event in LA. So Al, good to see you, and good to have you with us here tonight. And with Al is Sage Lewis, who we've gotten to know the last couple of years. Sage is not only an expert on Cuba and spent a lot of time there, but is a very, very talented musician. And we got to see one of his performances when we visited last year that was really inspiring, with children from Cuba and the United States singing together. I mean, that was just a very memorable moment, Sage, and one of the real highlights of our trip there. And getting to know Alyssa Fractor, who works with project as well too. And Alyssa takes care of all the details and keeps us up to date on what's going on. So welcome all. Good to see you. Bienvenidos. And let's talk about Cuba. Let's go. We're ready to go. Our bags are packed. We just don't have our visas yet, but we're ready to do that. So I think the big question on everyone's mind is, can you travel to Cuba today? What are the limitations, restrictions on going to Cuba today? And then we can talk about what we think it will be like in January. So Al, you want to tackle that? And put your mic on. Your mic?
Mike. Well, I'll take it. I'll start off. Al, you got to turn your mic on, but just want to thank you all for attending this conversation to learn more about Cuba and this amazing tour of Havana we're organizing with Plaza. As John said, is the second time we've done this after a really successful first one last year. A little bit about us. We're Project Por Amor, who's been artists in, we're all artists and we're based in Los Angeles. And we've been working in the arts in Cuba and travel for about 15 years. I first traveled in Cuba in 1998 because I was completely mesmerized by the amazing dance, film, food, history, music, architecture. It had so much more than I ever imagined. And so I started organizing these collaborative projects using video projection and digital technology, kind of what John was referring to. And through doing many projects that over many years, learned how to navigate a very complicated political system between two countries who have pretty much put as many barriers as possible to making exchange possible. So I met Nodal because he came in as one of my mentors when I was first starting working in Cuba. Al has been a major part of the Los Angeles art community and also the Cuban art communities, originally from Cienfuegos, and has been traveling back and forth building bridges for decades. And he's also very passionate about conservation and been restoring thousands of old neon signs, both in Los Angeles and Havana, throughout his whole life. So we've been doing these trips for about 10 years, and we take a lot of bands on tour to Cuba to perform and produce films there, put on art shows and other special projects. We believe there's nothing more rewarding or magical than seeing, hearing, and building friendship with our close neighbor who has been forbidden to us in many ways over 60 years, which is what John was talking about. There's the rules are always changing, and sometimes you can go to Cuba, sometimes you can't, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's more easy. It changes with almost every administration we have. And so we're in Al's gonna say a little bit more about the period we're in now and the period where we hope to be walking into in 2021 as the pandemic also hopefully makes more resolved and makes it safer to travel. So we're gonna go through all that and also talk a bit about this trip and what we're gonna be doing on it, which we're very excited about. So Al, make sure to, yeah, so you're unmuted. Why don't you talk a little bit about what's going on in Cuba right now?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here to talk to you about Cuba. Right now, Cuba is handling the COVID vaccine, the COVID-19 pandemic very efficiently. There's about 8,300 cases of COVID in Cuba that have been that have happened in Cuba, but there's only about 200 of them right now. 200 people that are in hospitals. So the numbers are pretty low compared to us. The reason for that is that they have a very strong public health system. Their public health is neighborhood based. And when you're in Cuba, you have a nurse and a doctor within every 3-block area, and they tend to everybody in their sector. So they're really very much connected to the people and I think the people of Cuba have gotten the message that they really need to do the right things so to reduce transmission. Cuba started their biotech system in the 80s. They're very much into science. The reason why they started their biotech system was because the US cut them off in terms of all medicines, and they had to create their own meds. So we're pretty much ahead in terms of most of the countries in Latin America in terms of producing medicines and focusing on public health. They have a lot of experience with it. They were they were really very, very involved in the Ebola pandemic and in SARS. Very recently, they went to Italy to help that country reduce treat their COVID patients. So they have a very, very very strong. They're very strong in that area, and they're all working together. I mean, it's sort of a little different than us here. They're all sort of marching along to the same tune and really working very hard to get rid of COVID in Cuba. They also provide meningitis and hepatitis B vaccines to the region and to Africa. So they're very connected. They're not like a country that's really sort of looking to us and to others to help them out in terms of this vaccine and COVID. There's currently 2 vaccines that they've developed in Cuba, and they're in the 3rd phase of their clinical trials. So they're hoping to have their own vaccines so they can avoid the Russian or the Chinese vaccines because they don't trust them. The economy is in shambles. Really, I should say that the economy of Cuba is very, very reliant on visitors, on tourism, and also the Trump administration has made some very, very hard and negative changes, like forbidding anyone to send any money at all to their families in Cuba. So they're really, really suffering financially, and they're just as eager as we are to start their visitor program again, so they can get their economy back in gear. This is really also hurting another important part of what's been happening in Cuba over the last 5 years or so, the private sector. There's a whole emerging private sector in Cuba, and they've been very, very reliant on tourism. So they're in pretty bad shape right now, but their spirit is strong, and they know how to survive. They've been surviving for 60 years under our crushing embargo. So they're real troopers, and they're moving forward. Currently, the Jose Marti Airport is open. They force you to take a COVID test on arrival, and you have to quarantine in your hotel for 24 hours. They say, I don't know how long that is, but for a period until they get the test on your test. And also, there's another interesting thing happening in Cuba right now. There's a whole artist movement developing in Cuba right now, sort of fighting for freedom of expression and basic rights for artists, and that is sort of happening at the same time. It's a little bit like the BLM movement here in the United States. It's happening right in the middle of the pandemic, and they're really fighting very hard for more rights. And we're excited about what's gonna happen there in the future. I mean, Havana's been there for 500 years and has got another 500 years to go, I hope. So everybody's just getting very excited about starting up and getting going again. So by the time we get there, things should be pretty well back to normal. And we shouldn't have any issues at all by November of next year.
Good. Thank you both. Alyssa, what's your background with Cuba?
I went to Cuba for the first time actually right as the whole world was shutting down for the pandemic. So I have a very different experience with Cuba, but what I connected with a lot, I'm also a graphic designer and have studied art and dance and music for a really long time. And I just really connected with how lively everyone is there and how expressive everyone is, and it was such a it's such a great change to see from, I think in the US we can be a little bit more reserved into ourselves, and I think that was like the biggest thing that connected me with Cuba was just all the art and music and joy that everyone has there. It was really great to see, especially when everything was kind of crumbling or it felt like the world was kind of coming to an end. It was amazing to see that like the joy is still there.
That's
We-
great.
We have a, John, we have an itinerary. We're going to just put on the things so people can have it. And we're not going to go through it, but we're going to talk about a few things that are on the itinerary to give you a chance to see what some of the exciting things that are happening there and some of the things you would see if you travel to Cuba with us. And I think
Okay, that
Sage,
sounds good.
Sage?
Yeah. The first thing is, Al, do you want to talk a little bit about what we do on day 2 of the Neon District, which you've been restoring?
Okay, well, first of all, let me just overall tell all of the people that are watching tonight that going to Cuba is pretty easy. It's, you know, it's one of those places that have been forbidden for so long, and people are afraid of going there, and they're worried about a lot of different issues, like being in touch and getting taxis and all of those things. The place is set up for visitors, so it's a very simple and easy way to we do all the work for you, but it's a very simple way to go. And once you're there, you'll say to yourself, wow, it's much easier than I thought it was going to be. We have a really great itinerary, and it's got everything in it, including the breakfast meetings and all the lunches and all of that. But I wanted to talk to you about one of the things we're going to see, which is something that's very dear to my heart. It's all about restoring historic preservation in Cuba and restoring some of the old signage that was there. And in a second, if you can put the first, can you put the image of the first image of all the old pictures, all the old signs? Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Nice. Wow.
This will give you an idea of what Havana was like in the 50s. It was just a place full of neon. I mean, Havana is a very noir city. It's a very glamorous place, even though there's a lot of need. People are very much into going out in the evenings and dressing up and going to clubs and all of that. And so it's a very, very exciting place to be. And in Havana, go to the next slide if you would.
So that looks like, is that Obispo Street there? Because I see Versailles there on the corner.
Yeah, that's not Obispo Street.
It's not, huh? Okay.
Yeah, this is the street right next to where the hotel where we stayed at last time.
Okay.
Sort of up that hill. This street goes all the way to the university. The next slide will give you another idea of what it looked like. I mean, the place was full of signage all over. Next. Can I do this? Oh, okay. Well, go to the.
Do you want the historical signs first, Dale?
Yeah, I want to do the historical stuff first.
Okay.
Go one. We got one more historical one, I think. Alyssa, further down.
Yeah, there we go. That one there.
That's all I got.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well.
That's the same. Yeah.
So the bottom line is that the city. Go to the one that says Cuba. That's got the car in front of it. The city lost all its signage over the years. First of all, commercial signage in Cuba became not an important thing after the revolution. They were really more focused on education and all of those things. And many of the signs had brands, American brands, and all of that. So all of those signs sort of came down because of non-use and also because of the weather. The weather just really got rid of them all. This picture is beautiful. The Cuba sign, which was one of the buildings, and I like this picture because it's got a car in front of it. And Cuba, all of you have heard about all the old cars in Havana plying the streets and moving people with the cars. The cars and the signs have a symbiotic relationship because the signs are very much If you go to the Megano, it will be good. The signs are pretty much made out of they were pretty much made at the same time that the cars were introduced. The 50s cars were introduced. So they're really, in a sense, they're sort of an extension of the cars that are going on the buildings. They're made out of metal, they're made out of glass, and they have light coming out of them. So another interesting thing is that all of these signs, as they came down, they became the important sheet metal that was used to keep the cars moving. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the cars and the signs that is really pretty beautiful. And when you are at night driving around in a convertible in Havana and see all these signs, it's pretty magical. Let's see, do I have another? The America, this is just one of the ones that we've restored. We started restoring signs in Havana 5 years ago as an art project. We sort of figured, like in LA, if you do an art project or you do a film project on the street, they let you get away with it if you call it a film project. If you call it something else, and you got to get a bunch of permits. So what we decided to do is create an art project to start restoring the signs. And during the Biennale 5 years ago, we started to fix about 15 signs around the city. This is the America sign. It's one of the most important Art Deco signs in the world. And it's about a 50-foot long sign. And now it's on again, and it's beautiful. And people are starting to remember their history. They're starting to remember and thinking about how the city's changed and what they want back. And it's sort of an incredible way of, bringing light back to the city, and including art out in the community. So this is one of the things you're going to be seeing during your visit to Havana.
That's great, because when you walk around the streets of Havana, you can see what a really beautiful city it was at one time, in its heyday, but that there just hasn't been a lot of renovation or repairs. Things have really almost been frozen since 1960.
Yeah,
you can almost mark the day, right? And I don't think that most of the buildings there have seen a coat of paint in at least 50 years. And I remember, Al, you made a remark once when I commented on that. You said, yeah, the saying is in Cuba and Havana that when it rains, another building falls, right? Yeah.
definitely.
And talk about the theater that you were involved with and the construction of it.
We started about 2 years ago to restore a fabulous Art Deco theater. And by restoring, I mean sort of picking up the ceiling from the floor. I mean, we started from scratch. There was no roofs in the building, and we spent 2 years killing ourselves to restore this Art Deco theater, and then the pandemic hit, so we gave it up. We sort of figured that we were not gonna be able to keep it going, and it was better for us. At the same time, we realized that we were slowly becoming museum directors and getting out of the street, because what we want to do is restore signage in Havana, not really run another museum in Havana. So it was the first neon museum in Cuba, but it was an important statement to make to the citizens of Havana that neon is important and it needs to be preserved. So now we're out of the museum business, and we're happy about that. And moving on to restoring more signs. When you guys go there, you're probably be going on a sign hunt with us, and we might even be restoring a sign where you're there.
Good. So you'll see there instances of that past glory coming back through the neon signs and through restorations of some of the buildings. But then you'll also see, and we'll get into this in a little bit too, some of the other great buildings in Cuba that have been maintained, like the Hotel Nacional, like the Tropicana, the Capitol building, which is modeled after our Capitol, was just restored as well too. I think that's done now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so you really see a contrast between these buildings that have been brought back to life and the other side of Cuba, that is kind of fallen behind. But what you see everywhere you go is just the vitality of the people of Cuba and the friendliness and how happy they are to meet Americans and to have them visit their country. That's something that you see wherever you go. So we've got a really jam-packed itinerary of things that we'll be doing there. So let's just talk about some of the other places, and some of the places I think that you wouldn't expect to see in Cuba, you know, and that I could go to every time I visit, in places like Fusterlandia and the Fabrica and the Finca. I mean, are just incredible, incredible places that like nothing else in the world.
Yeah.
So what's next on our
Sage is going to talk a little bit about music in Cuba and some of the music you're going to be experiencing as well.
Great.
So one thing that's Cuba's, like we were talking about, it's like going into a time machine and coming out in the 50s, also in the 20s, in the 70s, and in the 80s, all at the same time. And music, you see that too. Music is a different situation from architecture and signs because it's not, you know, rock and concrete and metal. It can evolve more easily, and so we'll see a lot of what's going on at night in the nightlife of Cuban music. But they also do a great job of preserving very proudly all the many different genres of music that they've been developing for over 100 years. It's one of their great contributions to the world. One thing that's very exciting and very special we're going to see is a group called Felix Chapotin y sus Estrellas, which is in a very important historical band here. This is actually a picture of Arsenio Rodriguez, who was the founder of the band. He was a blind tresero, a composer and one of Cuba's most renowned band leaders in the 40s. And he was blind, and he got an opportunity to go to New York City to get surgery on his eye. So he left Cuba and his band, which was one of the biggest bands in Havana during the 40s. In 1950, he left the band with Felix Chapotin, who's the trumpet player. And it started this, you know, legacy band that's been really important. But one of the reasons they're so interesting is because we go on the tres guitar. That's what Arsenio Rodriguez played, and that's the Cuban. The slaves in Cuba took the guitar, and they didn't have the guitar as part of their lexicon of musical instruments, so they played it like a drum, and they restrung it. Like most drums have 3 different sounds on it, and so they strung it so that there's three double sets of strings, and it's called a tres, and it's the main form of Cuban guitar, and it's a big part of their sonic. Puerto Rico, they have the cuatro, which has a kind of a similar history. But in this band, they were the first. They were innovators. They were the first to add brass into the format, because before they had they're called charangas, and they had strings, violins, flutes, bongo, timbales, but they didn't have brass in there yet, and they didn't have reed instruments. And he also, this band, they took the guitar, not the tres, the regular guitar, and they said, let's make this a piano and see what happens. And so it really changed the sound and became what the blueprints are of modern salsa music. It was called the conjunto. And so this was the first conjunto. And I want to make a distinction that's Cuban conjunto, which is different from Mexican conjunto norteño or conjunto tejano, which is a totally different thing. But this is in Cuba. They call it conjunto, and it became the beginning of son montuno and the many different cha-cha-cha, the many different types of ballroom dance music that came out of that. So really, just to finish the story, because it's so interesting, Arsenio, who founded this band, he moved to New York City. This right here is Felix Chapotin. In the middle, you can see Felix. He's a trumpet player, and a lot of Cubans, or a lot of people, Americans, they call him kind of like Louis Armstrong. He had a similar way of playing the trumpet and a similar vibe to him. But Arsenio went to New York and joined up with other Cubans who were living in Spanish Harlem to play music, such as Chano Pozo, Machito, Dizzy Gillespie, who we all know is American, but was playing with them, and Mario Bausa, and became band leaders of a lot of bands, which were mostly Puerto Rican, because most of the Latinos living in that neighborhood were Puerto Rican, and they started a huge movement of Latin jazz and the mambo style, which was giant during the 50s until the Beatles and rock and roll really just kind of moved to the top of the charts and stole the thunder out of this style of music, which started to die for a while. And so Arsenio Rodriguez coincidentally moved to Los Angeles to try to get a new start, but then died of pneumonia the same year he got there in 1970. So back in Cuba, Conjunto Chapotín y sus Estrellas went on, and playing and developing many styles of such as guajira, guaracha, mambo, danzón, danzonete, afro-son, bembe, rumba, cha-cha-cha, just really innovating and hit after hit within Cuba, which the music scene in Cuba started to become more isolated to the rest of the world as the revolution happened in the 60s and 70s. And bands that were big in Cuba were huge, but they didn't really make it beyond the borders of the island sometimes. But this band got a lot of international recognition. And then they ended up, Felix died in 1983, his son took over, and then named Angel, and then in 1980, Angel's son took over, Jesus Angel, who's now the leader of the band still today, who we're gonna be meeting. So what we're gonna do is they play in this small little barrio of Centro Havana, a tiny little venue every Tuesday. And they play these concerts, and a few locals from the neighborhood come and dance, and they just put on an extraordinary concert. And it's inside of the Egrem Areito, which is the name of Cuba's most famous recording studio, which you probably all have heard, because it's released many of the greatest Cuban records, including the famous Buena Vista Social Club, that record that they released in the 90s, which became, still today, is a big best-selling world music album of all time, recorded there. So they have a recording studio in a small venue. We're gonna go see there, and I'm friends with musicians with Chapotín, so we're gonna get to talk to them, and they'll give us extra attention and talk to us. And then if no one's actually recording a session in the studio at the time, they'll give us a tour of the recording studio where they record records. So I just want to show you to get a sense of what this is like. We have a little video to show of Chapotín today with their current format of the band. Oh, we got to get the sound. Unless you got to hit it so it has your computer audio going. You got to check a box that says use computer audio.
While she's doing that, the music of Cuba is so multidimensional. We tend to think of Buena Vista Social Club, which is great, but it's so much more than that too. And certainly in the big bands, Desi Arnaz got his start with one of the big bands when the casinos and clubs were a popular destination for American visitors to Cuba. And just as a programming note, we'll have Desi's daughter, Lucy, on Friday night and in Casa Coma Plaza, talking about her dad and his time in Havana.
You gotta get out of the screen share and get back in. And
there we go. Great. And you know, Sage, I don't know if you've seen them or not, but we have a band here in LA, the Arsenio Rodriguez Project, that plays pretty regularly at La Plaza. And I think has played at each of the Cuban American music festivals that we've done over the last 3 or 4 years. Really good. Very, very good. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's right in line with this band there.
Yeah.
Arsenio Rodriguez.
Good. And of course, you hear a lot of music just walking through the streets too, especially if you're in the Obispo area, where there's a lot of the stores and restaurants. You'll just hear live music wafting through the streets, and you just follow it, and it'll lead you to a little club where you can hang on and have a couple drinks and sit and listen to the music and dance until they close it down.
Cuba has music coming out of the water. I mean, basically, they have their amount of musicians per capita is amazing. So everywhere you go, there's fabulous music playing, and it's a lot of it's very informal. But Cuba, has a tradition of Cuban music, but also Western European music. They have a lot of classical music that's performed in Cuba, and there's opera, there's classical music, there's a symphony. So it's got a very large variety of types of music, even rap, all the way to rap and other new music forms. So it's a very exciting place in terms of the variety of music that's happening there.
I mean, generally, Cuban people are very, very enmeshed in the arts. The arts is very important in Cuba, right?
Yeah, definitely.
All kinds of arts.
And it's sort of interesting. The artists, the artists in Cuba have been the thought leaders for a long, long time. They're the ones who have been able to travel. They're the ones who have been able to go to other places and make money from their gigs, or they're selling their work and all of that stuff. So they're really within society. They're very important in Cuban society, and they're very much leaders. We're going to talk about another project now, which is Fusterlandia, which is something that you like very much. It's a very interesting project, and for many reasons. One, it's beautiful, but I think one of the most important parts of it is that this artist has been able to organize a whole community through his art and bring the community up. I mean, this was a community that was in very, very bad shape, and he started putting tiles and stuff in front of his house, and that grew. And then the neighbors wanted it, and then a lot of people, everybody around it wanted to be part of it. And it's about a 5 or 6 square city block at this point in terms of its impact. So it's brought up the whole neighborhood, and that people go to it. There's a lot of visitors that visit, and they have their own little shops and their own little coconut sales things and all of that. So it's art as a way of bringing the community up. And if you can run the video, Alyssa, you'll get a sense of it. This is Jose Fuster. It's about a 2-minute tape, so.
Yo cuando comenzamos alguna gente se sorprendieron, pero después la gente se empezó a acostumbrar porque esto no es de repente. Yo creo que la reacción es la gente cuando llega, ¿no? Que no lo ha visto. Pero el que ha vivido aquí, que ve que todos los días se hace algo nuevo, se ha ido acostumbrando. Todas las casas estaban con mallita de pollo, ¿no? Y entonces yo le fui pidiendo permiso a los vecinos, poco a poco empecé a hacer. Hemos hecho fiestas que la gente ha bailado, la gente se ha divertido cantidad. Entonces empezaron con esta historia de la alegría, del texto, como yo soy un tipo, mira, de corazón, de alegría, ¿no? Pues nada, me he contagiado también. La pintura no puedo dejarla, porque la pintura es la que sostiene mi proyecto, ¿no? Y la cerámica forma parte de mi vida, ¿no? Y entonces convivo con todas las especies, hago demasiadas cosas, yo creo. Hago dibujo también, acuarela. Pintura no solamente al óleo, el óleo es lo que más me gusta, pero hago también pintura en acrílico, hago de todo. Yo no tengo predilección por... Si te digo que la pintura, a lo mejor te engaño, después me pongo a hacer otra cosa y diría lo mismo de la otra cosa que estoy haciendo, pero todo yo lo hago con una intensidad.
This is happening throughout Cuba, throughout Havana. Many artists are taking to their neighborhoods and making them better. We're going to go to another really interesting project called Muraleando, which is a mural project where they basically taken a neighborhood that is really, really, you know, in really, really bad shape and improving it through community murals. They started a school. They got everybody together. It's sort of the arts are an organizing tool for a community to improve. So you'll be seeing that at Fuster's. You're going to be seeing that at Muraleando. Even Fabrica, which you're going to be talking about a little while from now, is the same kind of thing. Artists being leaders and actually moving out to the street and making things happen when the government can't really do it. And it's a trend. It's a private sector trend that the artists are leading in Havana.
Going to Fusterlandia, and you can climb all through his main house there. It's like kind of walking into a Disney cartoon, or it's like experiencing the Gaudí buildings in Barcelona. A lot of I think he draws a lot of inspiration from that too. And again, like nothing you'll see anywhere.
Yeah, he's heavily influenced by Gaudi. It's a little bit like the Watts Towers. If anybody here in LA has been to the Watts Towers, the only difference is the Watts Towers was not able to grow beyond the towers to the neighborhood, and this thing is just taken off. So it's a beautiful way to getting people involved.
John, behind you in that picture is the entrance to the Callejón de Hamel, which is another big important community art project of Afro-Cuban culture. You can see on the left side there. It's
Callejón de Hamel has become, and we're going to go to it. I think it's in our itinerary. If not, we'll take you anyway. But it's become probably the most important Afro-Cuban, contemporary Afro-Cuban place in Havana. It was really an artist named Salvador who was fed up of being kicked out of museum shows and stuff like that, and he started painting in front of his house. And after that, he started painting all the neighbors' house, and he turned a really terrible alley into what's called the Callejón de Hamel, Salvador's alley. And it's become a center for contemporary Afro-Cuban culture. And it's really exciting on Sundays. They got Roombas on the street, and it's sort of like going to Venice. It's just a fun place to be. So you're going to be seeing quite a bit of that.
Good. So what's next on our journey?
Finca Marta.
So another big part of our trip is food and agriculture. We're going to be going to a very fine selection of the best restaurants in Havana. And people used to say 10 years ago, if you went to Cuba, what was it like? And they'd say it was great, but the food was horrible, just not even really edible, and it was miserable eating every one of those meals. It's changed a lot because they opened up the ability, the legal ability for Cubans to open their own private restaurants in their homes, and so that just took off. And especially during the 2015 and 16, when the Obama administration normalized the relationship with Cuba, and there was a lot of entrepreneurship and investment happening on a very small individual level. So we're gonna eat some really good food, and we're also gonna see where does it come from, because Cuba has a fascinating history of food, and to understand the context of it. We're going to go out to this place called Finca Marta, which has an extraordinary farmers out there who've been transforming the next phase of Cuban agriculture. Cuba's been primarily an agricultural economy throughout history, beginning as peasants or campesinos, which in Cuba they call guajiros, and is a big important part of their culture. And it's been the biggest sugar provider in history after the Haitian Revolution. But it turned into sugar barons owning the island and using slaves to produce their operations and accumulate great wealth and bring it back to Europe. And also invest that in Havana, which is why a lot of the architecture is so good. But then Cuba, after that, became owned by the United Fruit Company and big agribusiness in the US, who turned it into sugarcane and tropical fruit to bring back to the United States. And it became all monocrops. And then the Soviet Union came in, well, the Cuban Revolution happened, and they kicked out all the different agricultural industry, and it became kind of a Soviet system with lots of machinery, lots of chemicals, and no one owned any land, and people worked on these huge state projects. And Fidel Castro used to drive them really hard to produce more and more and more sugar, because Cuba, all they really had to do in many senses is just export sugar to the communist bloc, and they were very well taken care of. They got the rest of their food, they got, you know, a lot of their other subsidies. But then when the Soviet Union fell in '91, Cuba was producing sugar, and they didn't produce any of their own food, and they became isolated, and they no longer had those food brought in from the rest of the world, from the communist countries. So they kind of starved for what's called the special period throughout the 90s, because you can't just live off of sugar. And they also lost their gas, and so they couldn't transport food around, and they couldn't run their tractors and stuff. So they had to, from the bottom up, develop a new agricultural system, which they had to do a lot in the cities, because they didn't have gas for the trucks to bring the food from the countryside into the cities. And that is, they started growing a lot more things, but today they still struggle, because they only produce at most 40% of their own food, and they still have to import a lot, most of their food, which is $2 billion a year to cost just for that. And one of the things that they were forced to do wasn't necessarily out of an idealism, but they developed a national organic farming system, because they didn't have access to the pesticides after that they were getting from the Soviet Union, or the fertilizers. And so that was how I actually originally went to Cuba, because my sister's, she specializes in sustainable agriculture, and she went to Cuba to study it and told me about it, and I became interested and wanted to go too. So, and when I first went to Cuba, she said, go meet this guy. And she gave me, right, Fernando Funes Monzote, and wrote his address down on a little piece of paper. And I went and I found that. It was in 1998. And I knocked on his door, and I said, hi, my sister recommended I talk to you. I'm just here. And I was, interested in meeting you, and talked to him for a little bit. He was an agronomist, a scholar, and he wrote a lot of papers. But then, so 10 years ago, he decided to take his theory and turn it into a practice. And he started this place called Finca Marta with his wife, Claudia. And they purchased 40 acres of land, rocky land with no water source on a hill, which was very slanted. And everyone in the neighborhood said, you are crazy. You're never going to grow anything there, and you're never going to find water. And they did it all by hand. They dug and dug and dug this well that went down, and took them 7 months without using any machines, and found water. Now they've become a world famous farm that Fernando gives TED Talks. He's published in a lot of international press by like New York Times and Washington Post, and he's been invited by the U.S. House of Representatives to come and tell them about Cuban agriculture. And extraordinary person. And so we are going to go visit there, and but it's more than growing food for them. They've got this vision of transforming Cuban agriculture so that it actually works, going back to the small farm, which is what they started at hundreds of years ago, and what the Cuban government is now trying to encourage people going back to that too, because they're realizing the big nationalized farms don't work quite as well either. But the problem is that the countryside became very well educated, and they didn't want to do manual labor anymore, and they didn't have ownership over it because it wasn't their own land. So they sort of lost the farming tradition in Cuba, which is why they can't produce enough food. And so he's part of a whole movement of people east of Havana who's trying to create the countryside as a profitable place to live and a desirable place to live. And so let's go some of these pictures of it. This is the most beautiful vegetable gardens that have over 60 types of vegetables growing.
Yeah, it's just immaculate. It's just perfectly immaculate.
Yeah, and it's some of the most healthy, juicy, flavorful produce you've ever had. Yeah, go on to the next one. And then the next one, they also have a huge honey operation, which they weren't expecting to have, but they just produce so much that they just kept going and have a giant apiary. And then they have this really cool system to keep going with how they, or using sustainable agricultural methods, use nature to bring ecological harmony to the place, so that they're creating, if you keep going, there's more slides. There's solar powered with a very sophisticated system of creating fertilizer and nutrients for the plants through these different, this is kind of like these compost waters that also have the manure, and then the whole irrigation system, which goes throughout it. And so they sell their food to all the best paladars in Havana. It's the most desirable place to get. They sell literally every scrap of food that they can grow, but they also reserve a lot of it for hospitals, nursing homes, and schools, so that it's not just all going to tourists and foreigners. So it's really cool. And what they do is they cook. It's not a restaurant, but they only do one group a week. So it's a real farm, but they will cook this amazing meal that we all sit down and eat, of homemade, homegrown meal. And then we spend spend a few hours with Fernando and his wife Claudia and some of the farmers, and they just hang out and smoke cigars and tell us about what they're passionate about and how they've kind of created this brilliant operation.
One of the things I wanted to add is that Cuba is fully organic. There's when you go to Cuba, all you eat is organic food, because basically because of the embargo, they were denied fertilizers and any chemicals to grow foods. It was sort of a strategy of the embargo to sort of starve them out, but they figured out how to do it without it, and they've been growing incredible food without anything at all. So it's really an organic place. And now that between urban farming and the great restaurants, it's become a foodie paradise. I mean, there's many 5-star restaurants, and you're going on this trip, you're going to the top 10 of them. So the food is going to be fabulous, and you're probably going to overeat.
Including the restaurant that Obama visited as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a paladar. Again, the paladars are private sector, which allows the money to go directly to the families, that are running it. So it's a very interesting place in terms of food.
So very, very little beef. We rarely had beef in Havana. A lot of pork, seafood. And of course, when you walk into one of the paladars, they'll always say, and you get 2 drinks with your meal. You get 2 drinks with your meal too. 2 rum drinks, of course. So
yeah, that goes with everything.
Yeah.
But the seafood is unbelievable. It's all caught right around it's all regional, so it's all caught right there in Cuba. So the lobsters are amazing. The shrimp, all of the food is really, really very, very good. And there's some really incredible chefs there that are creating new food. Because Cuban food for a long time was the food that was from the 50s that went to Miami and then it developed in Miami. And in Cuba, it got sort of stunted. So after all of these years with the urban farming and the restaurants, they're creating new food in Cuba. So it's really very interesting and very yummy. Now we're going to talk about a very exciting place. I would say that it's probably the most exciting arts center in the world, second only to LA Plaza de Cultura and Artes. And that it's sort of
Almost
neck to
on that
neck there with you guys
Right.
to get to become the most exciting place in the world. It's a place also which is part of the private sector. This is an artist, a band leader, X Alfonso. He's a rock band star. He's a very famous rocker. And he and his family took over a cooking factory and decided to create a cultural center for the city. It's got a 5-star restaurant, 2 5-star restaurants now, about 6 or 7 bars in it, hundreds of square feet of galleries, 3 stages. So the place is really, really rocking every night. And it's a place where you can see young people. It's a place that the young people of Cuba, when I go there, I feel good about the future of Cuba, seeing all these incredible young people.
Melissa, can you put the video on, the visuals?
Yeah, why don't you run?
Keep going, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
So it's become a place where all the international stars go to. It's now it was for 2019 and 2020. It was awarded as the world-class cultural center, the most important world-class cultural center in the World Travel Award. And that's a travel award that is voted in by people who and by travel experts and also people that just go see culture. So it's just a very, very exciting place. And we're going to run a very short 2-minute presentation on them.
Yeah. There's
But,
always a line to get in.
Yes, but you don't have to stay in line. You don't.
Yeah.
We'll get
Yeah,
you
we
through the
get-
line.
And it's got multiple layers of gallery spaces. It's got 3 different music stages. So there's usually a couple bands playing at all times. There's a big projection room where they're showing films and videos, a lot of people dancing, coffee shops. There's it's quite extraordinary because it's sort of the last thing you ever expected to see in a place like Cuba, which had almost nothing of this sort of place for nightlife. People would just go down to the ocean, the Malecón, and hang out there, or go to just real small bars or something like that. But this huge operation, which would be really hard to pull off in anywhere in the world, let alone Cuba, it's just kind of a little bit mind blowing. But we'll go there at night and hang out, and it's
you just wander around there. How many? It's what, five floors? Did you say 3 or 4? How many floors?
It's 4 stories. It's about
4 stories.
150,000 square feet. So it's big.
And you just walk around and you'll run into different little nooks and crannies, little coffee shops. You'll find a little courtyard outside upstairs. Always something new to see here. Just a lot of fun.
And it really shows Cuban art at its best. I mean, Cuban contemporary art is really, really exciting. I mean, Cuban art is about the new. It's not like a lot of other Latin American countries that are more focused on the tradition of the arts. Cuba doesn't care about tradition. Their contemporary artists are about cutting new ground and doing things differently. So you'll see very, very exciting art in Cuba, from conceptual art to paintings to all kinds of incredible music. So this is a very, very exciting place. You'll be there till about 3 in the morning if you have the energy, and then we'll go out and go to a few other clubs after that.
Yeah, and you could go there just about every night and not get bored, Yeah,
it's
you
exciting.
barely see the same thing twice. Good. Yeah, that's a great nighttime activity.
You'll be doing a lot of walking. Like as John said, the architecture in Cuba is amazing. I mean, they've got, world-class architecture from colonial to the Beaux-Arts to Art Deco to a lot, very, very large amount of mid-century architecture. I mean, the wealth in Cuba up to the 60s was really great, and it shows in the architecture. So there's a lot of great, beautifully restored buildings, but I like the ones that aren't restored, the ones that are really interesting to go into. We'll be going to some of the ones that are not in great shape, and you'll get a chance to see how Cubans live in the
Yeah.
splendor of architecture. So
Do we have any images of the Hotel Nacional or Tropicana too?
no, we didn't have images. We don't have images of Tropicana, but just if you can just Google Tropicana Club. Tropicana is another incredible place in Havana. It's a club that was established in the 30s, and it was a casino, and it's the only music venue in Cuba that has never been closed ever by the revolution. So it's been running since it started in the 30s, and it's a 7-night-a-week thing. It's a very, very large venue, and it's all about glam. I mean, Cuba, Tropicana really started the floor show. I mean, before the floor show, as we know it, went to Vegas and to other places, it was invented in Cuba. So there are major floor shows with, people wearing lamps on top of their heads and all kinds of interesting stuff. And the music is fantastic as well. So we'll be going as well there. But what we're going to do with Tropicana is we're going to give you a tour of the architecture, a daytime tour of the architecture, because we're also fixing all the neon in Tropicana. Tropicana has about 2 miles of neon in it. And we've got the contract to fix the neon in the place. So we have access to the behind stage, and we're going to take you in to give you access to places you probably wouldn't be able to go to as just a person walking there. So you'll get a lot.
Wow.
And then if you want to go to a show, we'll have a couple of open nights for you to go to Tropicana if you want to. We're also going to Buena
Highly
Vista
recommend
Social
that,
Club.
of course.
Go ahead.
And I was just going to say, Al, too, you recommended a book to me that I read called Tropicana Nights, which tells the whole story of the casinos and the competitiveness among all the casinos in Havana back in the heyday. And the Tropicana was the only one to survive. But really fascinating because it's interwoven, of course, with the history of the country as well, too.
Definitely. Well, when Fidel and his group and his whole group of revolutionaries showed up in Havana, they went to Tropicana and hung out there and started meeting all the showgirls and started to have fun again after being out out on the mountain for a couple of years. So they're very, very supportive of that place as a cultural center for Cuba, and also as a place that really showcases the music. So there's a lot we're going to go to Ernest Hemingway's house, Finca Vigía, which is another very, very interesting place. All of these things are like operas. They all have incredible stories. So you'll be hearing all of that. And you're going to be getting a ride on a fleet of beautiful convertibles. So we're going to run around the city like we live in Havana and check out the place. So the trip is really exciting. It'll be a good way for you to visit Cuba for the first time and get a sense of what's going on there. And then we hope you'll come back and visit often.
Or if you've been to Cuba, Cuba's like constantly changing, fascinating place, and it swings through major periods of history, and we're just swinging through a great one right now, and we're entering into a new one, which is really important. And visiting there is an important way to engage. The best way we have to engage with Cuba, if you believe in building bridges to Cuba and a better future, where going to Cuba and interacting with them and seeing the beauty that they have with how smart they are and passionate about so many different things is the most meaningful thing that we can do. And so it's such a honor to be able to and such a privilege to be able to go and interact with them on these amazing tours.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the safest places you can travel to at this point, because Cubans, they've been beaten by the US a lot over 60 years, but there's really no negative feelings about Americans. So they're really very, very positive about Americans, and you'll feel very welcome. And it's probably the safest place on earth to go right now, because they really take care of us. The tourism is their biggest crop, basically. So they're really careful that we all have a great time and nothing happens. So the connection, as Sage was saying, the connection between Cubans and Americans is really strong. and you'll get the feeling of that when you're there.
Good. And, you know, it really helps, as I've gone twice with Al, it really helps to go with a tour with a group that tours you around. The package that we'll have from La Plaza, we depart, I think, November 5th or 6th, sometime around then, for 7 days, is pretty much all inclusive. So it includes airfare, it includes breakfast every morning at the hotel, and we'll be staying at the Hotel Sevilla or Capri.
Capri, Sage? Riviera, right?
No, at the Capri.
At the Capri,
Capri,
which is,
yeah, Capri, which has recently been renovated in
Yeah.
a good part of
Awesome.
town.
Historic favorite hotel right in the center of town.
Yeah, great
Used
place.
to be a major casino as well.
So it's pretty much all inclusive, as Al mentioned. You know, I think we have 2 nights on our own to do a little exploration on our own. But other than that, everything is included. We also have a local tour guide, so we have breakfast every morning at about 10 o'clock. Our modern air-conditioned bus shows up, and we board the bus, and we have a local tour guide who takes us around. Al and Sage are there as well too, to add as color commentators to what's going on. So it's a great trip, and you see all the highlights. We pretty much stay in Havana because there's a lot to see and do there in a week's time. You know, it would be great to explore other parts of the island, but we'll leave that for another trip. So we will, I think we posted in the chat the link that gives you the full itinerary and information. We'll also have that on our La Plaza social media sites, on our Facebook and Instagram pages, and on our website. But if you really want to go to Cuba, if you want to experience Cuba, this is really the way to do it, I think, because you're really talking with people who know the country and can give you all the historical background and point things out to you that you would otherwise just walk by. So it's a lot of fun, and guarantee you'll have a great time.
we try to balance between giving you a lot to do. When you see the itinerary, you'll go, wow, there's so much to do. But there's also hidden in that itinerary, there's a lot of free time. There's time for you to relax and do things on your own. Because once you're in Havana for 1 or 2 nights, you feel like it's your city. You get a sense of it, and you want to go out there and check it out. So there's a lot of downtime as well. So you can spend some time on your own looking around.
Yeah, yeah. And as Al said too, you know, one of the first things they told us is it's a very safe city, and this was pre-COVID, meaning it's safe to walk around on the streets even late at night. So even women could go out and not have to worry about anything. So yeah, we saw very little.
Yeah, well, all the places we're going are, you know, places that you'll feel comfortable in. I mean, like any city, Havana is a big city, so you got to be careful. But you know, the bottom line is there's a friendship between Cubans and Americans that goes beyond a lot of the negativity. So people will open the door for you to come in and have a cup of coffee. If you're looking at their house, they'll invite you in for a cup of coffee. I've been to Cuba 10 in the morning on a Sunday morning to go visit a professor, and we all show up with big cigars, and she lets us in with big cigars. So I mean, it's a place that's very, very open and very hospitable.
Yeah. Abelardo, what were your memories of your trip there?
Well, yes. Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Al, Adolfo, and Sage, and Elisa for this, and John for this wonderful presentation. Yeah. Last April, we were part of the Travel con La Plaza group that went to Havana. My wife and I, that was one of our first international trips with our brand new passports, and incredible. We still have these wonderful memories of the warmth of not only the climate, but also of the people. The tour was amazing, as was stated. There's plenty, it's really well planned with a lot of surprises mixed into the what had been highlighted, going to, of course, the Fábrica de Arte, an incredible place that is a trip in itself. The finca, the paradars, No, highly recommended for people that have wanted to experience the island and the people, the music, the soul, the cooking. It's incredible. So highly recommended. We have a few questions here. Let's see, where do you stay? That's been answered. Thank you so much for that. What is the weather like in Cuba during that time? Who could answer that? This is taking place November 7th through the 13th. And as is stated, we've included the link to the itinerary and the whole trip on both social media and here on Zoom. So who could answer that? What's the weather like during that time?
I'll start. November is a really wonderful time to go to Cuba because, first of all, Cuba is always hot. It's always hot during the day, and you gotta, when you sign up for the trip, we'll send you a bunch of trip tips and suggestions on what to wear and all of that. But the cool thing about November and December and January is that in the evenings, the trade winds come in and it cools off a little bit. Takes that edge off of the heat, and it's a time for everybody to get dressed up and go out on the night, on the evening. So it's cooler than most months, so it's a very, very good time to go. But during the day, it's always hot.
All right. One question that we had, I guess, dealing with 2021, new administration here in the U.S. and the question is, any idea when Mayorkas, who's the designated head of Department of Homeland Security, what is his view on opening Cuba to U.S. tourists, if anybody has an idea about that?
Well, what I can tell you is that Alejandro Mayorkas is an LA Cuban. He wasn't born and raised in Miami, so that's a good thing right away in terms of his attitude about burying the hatchet and connecting back in and figuring out how to put Cuba back on track in terms of being part of the international world with the United States. So he's somewhat positive about and he's been to Cuba himself. He went with Obama when Obama went down there. So everything leads to going back, at least on the travel parts of it, going back to the Obama policies. A lot of those policies were changed by the Trump administration through presidential directives, and Biden has got a list of things he's going to overrule on his first 100 days there, and we're hoping that all of the extra things that Obama threw in to make things a lot more bitter than they could have been will be taken away, and tourism will come, and visitors will be coming back to Cuba. And the important part of, I started doing Cuba travel 20 years ago, and over 20 years, myself and other tour operators, including Sage and others, have brought a lot of Americans to Cuba, which has been very good because Americans have had a chance to see what it's all about, and they have their own points of view about it at this point. So the more Americans that go to Cuba, the more they connect with Cubans and make connections, the more Cuba is going to grow and change. So I think it will be part of the Biden administration's policy to bring back the travel aspects of it. There's other aspects of it that they'll have to negotiate, but the travel part of it will be happening pretty quickly.
All right, thank you. I'd like to welcome a lot of the viewers that came in today. Julie Roberts, zooming in from New Mexico. Mario Chacon from San Diego, Califa. CCHB from Garden Grove. Jim and Mindy from Bend, Oregon. Maria Lugo from Palmdale. Carl Kravitz, thank you to Alan John. This was a wonderful introduction to Havana and Cuba. Don't know if we can make it in 2021. That's Carl and La Doctora, Alisa, but looking forward to joining you in 2022. And Cookie, Jan Schreiber, hello to Sage. We were on the tour in 2016 and had a wonderful time. Maybe we can do it again. Finca Marta was one of our favorite places, and it was one of my and Linda's favorite places as well. So thank you so much to everybody, to En Casa con la Plaza with this little taste of Cuba. If you joined us late or into the program, you could catch the recording. We'll be posting it on YouTube within an hour's time. Also, it'll be living on our Facebook page at La Plaza LA and on our website at the lapca.org. You could catch this program and all of our other En Casa con la Plaza programs as well. And we've had a couple others that deal with Cuban. We had a performance by San Miguel from Cuba and Estrés, a phenomenal conversation and performance. You could catch it on our YouTube page. Thanks to our sponsors, SoCal Gas and California Humanities, who've made these possible. This program had the additional support from One Legacy, a nonprofit organization dedicated to saving lives through organ, eye, and tissue donation in 7 counties in Southern California. Once the pandemic is over, 2021, we've had Cuban-oriented programs in the past, including the Cuban American Music Festival, scheduled the 3rd annual or maybe even the 4th annual this past summer, but hopefully we'll have it next summer, 2021. We've had Los Van Van, Cuba's premier and an international band, playing at La Plaza last summer. As John mentioned, the Arsenio Rodriguez Project and other Afro-Cuban bands during our Summer of Salsa series at La Plaza, curated by our good friend Guido Herrera Yance. You can find our upcoming programs on our website, lapca.org. I'll go ahead and post the link here on the Zoom and also on our Facebook page. As John mentioned, this Friday, our every other week happy hour with fabulous Dan Guerrero, who is going to be hosting a good, well-known Lucy Arnez, the daughter of Desi Arnez and Lucille Ball, who'll be telling us stories about her father. I mean, an incredible actor, of course, singer, band leader, and one of the pioneers of television. So thank you so much again, Al, Sage, Alisa, John. Any last words?
We hope you join us. It's going to be a lot of fun, and you'll learn a lot about world history as well as Cuban history.
Sounds good.
Right.
Yep. And you couldn't go with a better group of people too.
Thank you, John. We appreciate that.
Well, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Sage, Alisa, John, Al, everybody out there, and join us once again on En Casa con la Plaza this Friday and for weeks to come. Muchas gracias a todos. Muy buenas noches.
Good night.
Okay.
Not just.
Thank you, guys.